Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Christine Wooler. I'm one of the lead writing tutors at LMU's Writing Center. And today I'm going to be giving a bit of a workshop webinar on how to organize your writing in writing projects. So first, I'm just going to talk a little bit about why is organization important. We're going to go over the different parts of a paper. We're going to talk about macro organization versus micro organization, how to organize your writing projects, and thesis writing. So jump straight into it. Why is organization important? First of all, it's going to make your paper a lot easier to read and understand for your readers, for your audience. A good organization means a clear structure. It improves the flow of the paper. It's also going to highlight your thesis, your main points, and your argument a lot more effectively. So that goes back to making it a lot easier to read. Your audience is going to get the point of your paper a lot easier if your thesis and your main points all jump out at them, which is a result of good organization. It also makes it easier to get started. So as a reader, it's going to be a lot easier, but also as a writer. So you as a writer, when you're writing these papers, it's going to be a lot easier to get started, to brainstorm, to improve, and to actually write the paper when you have good organization and a good outline. And so that's what we're going to be talking about today. So it's a lot easier to write, and it's a lot easier to read when you have a good organized paper, excuse me. So different parts of the paper, you probably know most of these. We're just going to go through them really quick. Title that reflects the main point and the purpose of the paper clearly and concisely. Your introduction provides background information, context. It's also going to include your thesis, which is your argument or main idea. It usually goes last in the introduction. It's going to tell the reader exactly what the paper is going to be about. It presents your argument if that's applicable, if it's an argumentative paper. And it also tells the reader how the flow of the paper is going to go, what you're going to talk about first. So body paragraphs, that's the meat of your paper. Those are all going to include topic sentences, main ideas, evidence, and analysis, and all of that should tie back into your main idea, which is represented in your thesis. So your thesis should reflect your paper should reflect your thesis. And then conclusion, you're summarizing those main points again and the purpose of the paper, and then why does it matter? Why should your audience care? So discussing the significance of the argument you just made is super important. And then bibliography obviously goes last, and that's just citing your sources. So macro versus micro organization, we're going to go through this pretty quickly. Macro organization, those are like overall paper organization where you put your paragraphs, your thesis, source integration in the whole paper. So that's things like writing outlines, listing out your main ideas, finding sources, planning out your papers in advance. That's all macro organization. Micro organization is individual paragraphs, individual sentences, your topic sentences and the supporting details, how you include evidence in each sentence or each paragraph. And so to plan that out, you can write out your topic sentences ahead of time. You can list supporting details for each of those. You can match your evidence to your topic of that specific paragraph ahead of time. And so macro is paper organization, micro is paragraph organization. That's a good way to think about it. And a good paper will have both. So those are important things to think about as you're writing. So how to organize writing projects, outlines. Outlines are one of the easiest and also one of the best ways to organize writing projects because it helps you get all of your ideas and all of your things on a page before you even start writing. So steps to writing an outline, you can see that in outline format on the slide. So you're going to start with a working thesis statement. Working thesis, if you've never heard that before, it basically means it's a thesis in progress, so it can change, and it probably will as you write. So as you write your paper, your thesis might need to be edited a little bit. Same with your paper, you should be reflecting your thesis. So working thesis is what we start with. It probably will change as you write your paper. Don't stress about that. Just something that states your main idea that you can start with. Next, you're going to want to list your main points that you want to make in this paper. And these can be pretty broad, pretty vague. They don't need to be super specific, but just list all of them down. Get them on the page, just what you want to talk about in this paper, the main points that support your thesis. And then underneath each of those main points, write out all the subpoints that you want to make about that specific part of your argument. And by doing that, you're fleshing out all of the main points and all of the subpoints that you want to bring up so that you don't lose track, so that they stay organized. The flow of the paper then improves. And then you also want to list the evidence that you're going to be using for that main point in this outline. And so that will kind of help you to, when you start writing your paper, know where your evidence is going to go, which point you're going to connect it to. And then underneath that evidence, you can kind of put a bullet point of like the analysis or the connection you're going to be making for that topic. And again, all of this is just to get it on the page, get you started, so that when you write your paper, you can reference back. And so repeat that process for each of your main points. And then once you have main points, subpoints, evidence, analysis, all of that bullet point, again, doesn't need to be full sentences, just bullet points. Once you have all of that, you can organize them into an order that makes sense for your argument. So that's the basics of how to write an outline. So we're going to look at a sample outline here. On the left side, that's just bare bones sample outline, introduction, body paragraph 1, body paragraph 2, conclusion, easy peasy, nothing to it. On the right side, this is an example of an outline. So if I was writing about history of the Bauhaus movement, which you don't need to know what that is for this exercise, but that's where I would put information. So like introduction would be like, what is Bauhaus, who invented it, background information that my reader needs to know before going to my thesis. And my thesis is my claim, my argument, what my paper is going to be about. Body paragraph 1, that's going to be historical context, really fleshing out like what is Bauhaus, what does my reader need to know for the rest of my argument. Biographical information on the founder, that could go there. And all of this is going to be with evidence and analysis, making claims, making sure that I'm referencing back to my topic sentences in my thesis. Body paragraph 2 might be the art's evolution throughout history, compared past and present. Body paragraph 3 might be the effect on Bauhaus on art today, using examples of modern art as evidence. And my conclusion is recapping what I've just argued and why that's important. So this sample outline is to show you how we would insert information from whatever we're researching into this like sample outline on the left, like where things would go. And again, this is just so that when you're writing it, it stays in organized format so I don't get distracted, I don't go off on tangents, I'm not mixing information from body paragraph 3 with body paragraph 1, everything stays in its paragraph and its section so that it flows really well. That's the point of an outline, especially for longer projects, or maybe you're working on multiple projects during finals, that kind of thing. So now that we've looked at kind of outlines and how we can use those to organize our writing, we're going to talk a little bit about thesis. Thesis writing is really important to your organization because, again, as I mentioned, your thesis should reflect your paper, but your paper should reflect your thesis. So to practice thesis writing, I would advise you to go to the LMU Library website, go to LibGuides, which is under the search bar, run search, go to the writing LibGuide, general writing, and then on the left side, click formulating a thesis. Scroll to the bottom of that page, and there's a writing activity called formulating a thesis. And there's also an answer key for that activity. And that will help you practice thesis writing and how to write a thesis that accurately reflects your paper. So again, it should reflect your paper, vice versa. And working theses, especially when you're writing your outline, they're great because you can write your main idea, what you want to get across in your paper. But as you write your paper and that changes a little bit, I would suggest going back. So I actually advise people normally to write your thesis last. So start with a working thesis, a bare bones thesis of what you need to get across to your readers, and then write your paper, and then come back to your thesis and make sure that that's accurate. And so it's going to need a little fine tuning, some editing. Also, don't stress about a working thesis, about the wording, about trying to make it fancy. Just write what the main idea of this paper is. And then as you write your paper and get into the flow of writing and you know more about the order it's going to go in, it'll be a lot easier to go back to your thesis at the end, fix up the wording, fine tune it, and get it ready for a final draft. And then a thesis is also different from a roadmap. That's an important distinction. So a thesis presents the argument or main idea of your paper, while a roadmap lets the reader know the flow of the paper, which points you're going to make first, second, third, etc. So most papers, all papers should have a thesis. Some papers will have a roadmap, some won't. It depends on the scope of your paper and that kind of thing. But a roadmap is basically connecting your topic sentences. So working on that will also help the organization of your paper overall. Some other things to consider while you're thinking about organization. Not all papers are going to be like a standard 3 body paragraph intro conclusion paper that we learned in high school, right? There's going to be different types of papers with different purposes. So if you're not totally sure how to organize that and it doesn't totally fit the sample outline that we talked about, ask yourself what the purpose of the paper is going to be. Are you arguing something? Are you informing? Are you persuading? Are you researching? And then ask yourself what your reader needs to know in order for you to achieve that goal. What are the most important points you need to make? What are the other things that they need to know while you're writing this, that kind of thing. As you're gathering research as well, for bigger papers especially, it can be super overwhelming to be looking at all these different sources and writing down all these different quotes and not totally knowing where they're going to go. So what I like to do is kind of organize them into categories. Maybe I'm an English major, so maybe I'm reading a book and I'm organizing quotes by theme, like gender or class. Maybe I'm looking at my outline and I have 3 huge main points that I need to get evidence for, so I'm putting those into categories as I go. But by taking individual quotes or sources and putting them into categories of main points or subpoints as you gather it, will make it a lot easier when you're writing your outline and writing your actual paper to know where evidence is going to go. It's also okay that not everything from your outline might go into the paper. It's a lot easier to have more information, have to cut it, than to find more information later. So I would advise that when you're making these outlines, try to make them as thorough as possible so that when you're writing your paper, it's a whole lot easier. And then if you do need to cut stuff, that's easy. You can just go through and cut whatever isn't totally necessary, as opposed to not having enough in your outline and then having a hard time to write these papers. And finally, outlines and organization methods are to help you and make it easier for you to write. So if you get assigned an outline, or maybe you're not jazzed about outlines because it feels like extra work, it's going to help you down the line. So even if it's more work up front, later when you're writing a 10-page paper and you're like, man, I don't even know where to start, you can look at your outline and you already have everything laid out. So even if it seems like extra work to focus on organization, it's going to make it easier for you to write. And ultimately, your paper is going to be a lot easier to read. So I would advise outlines, other organizational methods as much as possible for your writing. So thanks for listening. I know this was pretty short and I sped through it. So refer back to that sample outline and how to write outlines. There's other resources on LMU's library as well. But organization is huge in academic writing, especially with bigger projects. So please keep that in mind. Good luck with all of your projects and papers going on right now. And I hope this was helpful. Thanks for tuning in. All right. Bye.